welcome to the Nonprofit Renaissance. I'm one of your co-hosts, Colin, and I'm excited to jump back into our conversation with founder and CEO of Verse Creative, Justin Price. We left off last week talking through our nonprofit manifesto, 5 guiding principles that we believe will start a revolution in the nonprofit world. So thank you so much for joining us and listening in. Here's the rest of our conversation with Justin. All right, so let's bring it to our next pillar, number 3. So that's fostering collaboration. We advocate for the power of collaboration and the strength of partnerships within the nonprofit community.
Yeah, no, collaboration, I think, sounds good on paper. Everybody wants to do it. Then when you actually get to it, I think it could be very cutthroat out there.
Yeah.
And we'll love your insights, Justin. We've been in it. You've been in it. We've seen it. In business it is, but in nonprofits too, because if people are looking out for the best creative, if they're raising funds, if they're developing donors, if they're building, how do we foster true collaboration that's healthy? And how do we avoid a cutthroat competitive cage?
I think being as upfront and as transparent as you possibly can be with what it is that you're going after helps a lot. So, every time that we partner up with a nonprofit, there's 2 challenges. One is that there's a staff that is insufficient for where they want to go. If they're hiring Verse, there is a staff there that have good hearts and they're fully committed and dedicated. And I think the assumption is that we would take their job. That if we could, we'd be happy to have a contract that replaced their job. And the reality is it's not at all what we want. If anything, I want to create more jobs for that staff. I want to grow them. I want to give them a strategy. I want to give them a vision and a value proposition that'll help them see that, hey, if we do these things, we can actually get some more people on staff there. That's going to move us along. That's going to create things. Maybe it's just going to be a tool that's going to help make their job more fulfilling. So I think being transparent about right off the rip, I try really hard to be conscious of it when I'm talking with a staff. But oftentimes a leader is like, hey, I need these results. I don't really care. And when that happens, the staff member who was maybe in the seat to get those results and couldn't, maybe this is like a communications director who's never had to do project management before for a lot of projects at the same time. And so we're going to come in, maybe we're going to help them get onboarded with a good project management software so that the whole organization, maybe there's 200 employees or something, the whole organization can now run through a nice communication system. Well, we still need that communications director, but it's very threatening if you all of a sudden go, I'm not sufficient to get these projects done on time, to budget correctly for the resources to get them all through. And Verse is coming in and maybe they could do all the projects, and I'm threatened by the fact that they might potentially put my job at risk. And so making sure that we can communicate our heart for them and also the appreciation for the fact that, look, there's nothing more important than you being fully sold out and dedicated in the role that you're in right now. We're here to support it. We want to make you look good. We want to make sure that these goals and objectives get done. And if we do that well, we feel good about helping you. You feel good about moving the whole organization forward.
True. And we've seen that, especially in the growing, partnerships and organizations we work with. As the mission and vision grows, as the results grow, there's always more opportunity.
Yeah.
For, to add team, to add, so it's never replacement. It's never there to undo, what they're doing. So it's been fun to watch the growth of those who truly understand that and don't get intimidated by, a collaboration, a true collaboration for growth.
But it is scary though. I mean, because there's a lot of agencies who do it bad. There's a lot of people who come in and they overpromise a tool or a widget or something that's going to just change the game. And you go, oh, this is going to be great. And next thing you know, it's they're not really sold out for your mission and for your vision.
All right, Justin, let's unpack that another inch, because we're constant conversations about this.
Yeah.
Give us a practical example. Something comes to mind? What's that widget? What's that too good to be true, one trick pony?
I'm going to say something. It might
get us canceled.
It might trigger some PTSD for some of the listeners.
Okay, bring it.
But
drum roll, please.
Church management software.
Ooh, there's a bunch of them.
Donor management software.
Yeah.
Both, no matter what like perspective you're in, whatever aspect you're in, if you're, specifically in a church, um, most of the people who sell the software are selling the features of the software, and they're selling we're going to do it for you to get you switched over process. What they don't understand, what they don't resonate with is the pain. Most of them, and there's some great vendors out there, but most of them are going to come into it to an organization and they're going to say it's only going to take this long and it's only going to cost this much. Well, that's what it costs to have them there, but it's not what it really costs the organization. What it really costs the organization is almost always 2 to 3 times more, because the organization has to change the way they did things before. If they want the organization to change, they have to start to change the actions of how they even use that software, right? And so we've got to do things to collect data differently. We have to clean up data. We have to go through and create systems to make sure that, like, maybe not all of the software is actually talking to each other, right? The kids check-in isn't actually clicking the attendance. Well, how are we not tracking attendance when someone was there checking a kid in? That's a great way to get attendance,
and
right?
basic,
But when we look at the data and their reporting, they don't have, it's all disjointed, right? It's like, well, we have this kids check-in data. We've never actually looked and put it all together. We've never connected it all the way through baptism. We've never connected all the way through like a volunteer or somebody who's giving or leading a group or even getting plugged into a group, the full assimilation things that most of these organizations want to do. And so what happens is that kind of a vendor comes in and makes this promise and says, we're going to do this and it's going to cost you $100,000 or this thing or whatever. And then they leave this mess. They never really told them how to figure out. And what happens is all of those people who are in the trenches, it's to me the best visual phrase I can have is like that the nonprofit staff are almost always underpaid and oftentimes undervalued, oftentimes underbudgeted for what they're being expected to do. And that outside vendor comes in, sells them something at a profitable rate for them, and then says, good luck. And that person now has to pick up the pieces. They're in the trench. They're trying to make whatever that nonprofit's mission actually run. And now they've got to solve this other problem on top of it. And so they have every right to be afraid. They have every right to have their guard up. And so I think collaboration, to be a good collaborator starts with being transparent. And I think considering the other person's needs first. And so I think that's, it's not about what I want for an organization. My job is to listen really well. We've got 3 values that I hold to really really closely at first, which is the first one is to listen. And then the next one is to make sure we're doing everything based on a strategy. And then the last one is to be brave with those strategies to push the boundaries. And so it really does all start with actually listening to what they need, coming up with a strategy that's going to actually deliver what it is that they need, not what I want for them or what I would love to see for them or want to sell even. So if all of the vendors for nonprofits would take that approach, I think the people working in there would be in a lot better place.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. Many times we've listened, we've heard, and I've seen you do this many times where you're just helping them identify that before starting or adding anything, there's some things they need to just stop and undo. And that's a lot of it, and most people show up trying to sell or give you another widget to stack onto the other dysfunctional widgets. And I think it's the wrong approach. So like I said, it's difficult because there are days, we've talked about this. We wish we had a widget that could plug and play and run. That, unfortunately, that doesn't serve the organizations or that in nonprofits the best. And but I love that. Listen, part of number 4 on the manifesto, Colin, is encourage continuous learning and growth, which is what we're doing. It's what we're talking. We've done this for many, many years, but it's a landscape that ever changes. I mean, it's constant. The minute you figure something out, it's evolved, it's changing again, whether it's policies and grants and laws, whether it's AI and innovation with tech. Justin, what's on the top of your radar? An emerging, innovation in this sector that we've talked about some of the problems. Any tips, tricks, solutions, to drive positive impact, and how some other organizations listening can incorporate them? What have you been pushing Colin to do and myself?
Well, let's leave some of that out. But.
I'll start by saying that I push empathetically in the sense that the area that's changing the most right now, specifically in all things systems and communications, marketing, sales, advertising. It almost all has a technological base to it. Now, what's interesting is that we can't let go of the human aspect of all of that. Oftentimes, we think that the technology is going to fix our problem, and it doesn't really need a human perspective. It does, which is way harder, right, than just implementing technology. So, a few areas like to give you some tactile things. I would say segmentation. I think personalization within communication is becoming key. Right now, we have too many channels that are able to communicate with us. In our phones, we've got apps that we can turn notifications on and off on. We have text messaging, which is coming through all the times. We have phone calls that are coming through. I don't know about you guys, I get 5 to 10 spam calls a day, which is really fun. So I leave my ringer off because of that. We got emails, hundreds of emails flooding our inboxes every day. And so I think with these communications constantly coming through, and Donald Miller says really well, like we got 5,000 brand messages a day that our brains are filtering out. So on top of the actual messages, we have brand messages that we're constantly filtering through, and so our brains have had to adapt a little bit to this kind of an environment, which means they're shutting off anything that's not hyper relevant, and super valuable to us. And I think one of the biggest things is man, we can look at donor development and we can say, rather than oh, this is the tool or the technology we got to use, it's just we need to figure out who those donors are, segment them into bases, and then communicate with them about what's important to them. For a church, we got to understand that we got to stop sending emails to that woman who can't have kids and stop sending her the nursery update.
That's
right?
good. Man, that's good.
Yeah.
It's a good example.
We also got to stop, sending the single person to the marriage conference.
Yeah.
Who's still looking.
They've already tried. They've gone, and they're still single.
I don't know. There's a strategy there. And
it feels stupid to pick on little individual events like that, because you're oh, that was one email, Justin, throughout the whole year that maybe fell on some ears, but it's the technology is here, where we can now segment it. We can now take our user database and we can click what those users need, and they can even ask which channels they want the communications to come through. And then now, as an organization, we have the tools and the abilities to put together communication strategies that say, hey, if this person asked for push notifications, this one wants text, this one wants email, it's still the same communication for us to them. And now we're just saying it to the right audience the right way. And what's cool is that could be really overwhelming. If you're sitting here and listening to this conversation and you're not doing any of that, you have a mass mailing list that you do most of your physical mail with, that
which
you
I think is
are blowing tons of money.
Listening.
Most people listening are in that position.
Yeah.
It feels too big and too overwhelming. That's great insight, Colin. You're right.
Before we go to 5, because I do love that, and most organizations think they're doing good, think they're busy sending,
because they're saying something,
because they're doing
yeah.
When in reality,
they're shotgunning information.
It's creating fatigue, and people are so checking how that's performing is important. Most people don't. They're just we sent out 1 million emails.
Yep.
Okay, how many unsubscribed? How many actually opened? Who clicked? Did it engage? What are and those are the deeper questions in the strategy that you always want to be asking.
It's not fair. Verse has so many clients with so much data at our disposal that we get to just look at it, and it feels so cut and dry to us, where it's just hey, why are you sending that message out on Instagram to a seniors audience? They're not there. We know how to run an ad to Facebook, which you might be thinking, I thought Facebook was dead. But it's not. It's actually thriving for 60 and over.
Yep.
They're loving their grandkids' pictures on Facebook, and they are super primed for donor development on Facebook.
They've got it down to. They're not getting the paid Facebook. They're posting on their wall. They got that stuff down. I haven't learned that yet, but I'm still waiting for my $7.99 charge to come in. But Phyllis is not. She's covered. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So they're killing it over there on Facebook.
Colin's on. Follow him on Snapchat at Colin. No, it's more of a just kidding.
But you know what I'm saying? It's not fair. I can so blatantly say hey, segmented strategies are really straightforward and simple. But again, this is going back to that first principle of the inside, or the second principle of like they're inside, they don't know what's outside, and all they maybe know is that like our Facebook ads that we were running to the general audience aren't really converting. And last time I had someone walk into my organization saying I came from a Facebook ad was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And so we stopped and we quit putting emphasis into Facebook. And it's like, and for a lot of organizations, it's the right thing to do. But for that one trying to fill in the gaps on a 60+ audience, they're missing one of their cheapest marketplaces. So
It's good.
segmentation, I think, is a good area where you can put everything. You could say like, hey, I'm pushing pretty hard across almost anything because it's so human, and it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's always a little reverse psychology, because anytime I'm in a session with Justin or building roadmaps or strategies, many times you're not suggesting them to do more or to add more dollars but you're asking them to like, hey, focus, zero in, let's segment, let's target, and because that's going to yield the result. And I think in the long term, that's what's going to bring the result. Not just a billion mailers and let's cover the city.
Yeah,
it's trash. It's going to end up in the trash, and the person who was supposed to look at it didn't, because it got lost literally in the mail.
as like marketers though, it's like our job to figure out the best ROI possible. Like there's 100 ways we can spend $1 to try to get an action, and it's like that doesn't make you good at marketing if you know how to spend money. What makes you good at marketing is finding the 1 or 2 of the 100 that have the highest yielding return, and that's when you get clients. We've got a massively successful retention rate with our clients because they know that if we're suggesting it, we really believe that it's the best thing possible, because that's our job security, and that's the only job security we have.
Totally.
But yeah, it's definitely a challenge for a lot of people. It's definitely a challenge. You said something interesting too, which is that I'll oftentimes like say, hey, let's actually say no to a lot of things. Focus on the 1 or 2 things that are really good. And that's another really great perspective we get to have when you're from the outside, because we get emotionally attached to all of the things, in our organizations. So that's one of the advantages that like doesn't make me smarter. I'm no like better than anybody else, but when I get to walk into an organization and take a fresh perspective, look at them from the outside and not have the emotional attachment, it allows me the ability to see some clarity that they may not see.
Be objective. Yeah.
That's huge.
Take us to number 5, Colin.
Yeah, man. So we want to inspire a new era of philanthropy. We want to see more generosity, more empathy, more social responsibility. Not just like we think nonprofits this is where it's going to come from, but we want to see that everywhere. So what are some strategies or initiatives that you recommend for nonprofits looking to cultivate that generosity, that empathy, that social responsibility, both within their organizations and the wider community?
Which, by the way, let me break this. Okay, just for the 5th grade level, when my kids listen to this. Okay, philanthropy. What is philanthropy? Right. It's number 1. The charity fund. Boom. Talking about nonprofit. So wait, philanthropy, but it's a nonprofit. Is there profit in a nonprofit? And talking about social responsibility. So let's break it down a little bit more. For us, it's trying to inspire generosity. Period. I think we feel like that makes for a better world, better people, better humanity, and not losing touch with that. How do we even approach that? Like, how do we even start that conversation in the sector?
Well, I've got one perspective I take on every conversation that I start, and that's value. So if you said like, what's the value of being generous?
What is that? Answer that.
Man,
put a dollar amount.
So I already said one PTSD triggering.
Let's do it. No, this is the PTSD episode.
Phrase.
This is the PTSD episode with
things
Justin Price.
But I was having a conversation the other day with a friend about tipping.
About tipping.
Tipping is getting out of control.
Tipping is getting out of control. That's an understatement right there.
I mean,
tell me more. I'm interested.
Yeah, I
Wait,
went to
did you ask him to tip already, or was that going to be after?
That's after.
Okay.
Yeah, like putting in a tip jar for the podcast, you guys. Like it's.
Wait a minute. We read that in your book.
I
man.
bought your coffee.
You noticed that was a tip jar?
No, okay, but this is interesting because we're trying to promote.
And also, why did you put hundreds in it?
That's hilarious. I know. Way to seed it, bro.
I only contributed singles.
No, that's a great point, because if we're trying to build a generous community, generous families, tipping is a real life scenario where is that being generous, or is that paying for service? Is that
Right.
covering the cost of whatever?
It's just gotten out of control. So culturally, um, it started with wait staff got paid below minimum wage. They got supplemented with tips, and they could make a good living with those tips. And so I think there was a social responsibility to tip. And when you ate out, you expected to spend that extra money. So when you're ordering a sandwich for $10, you know that you should plan on spending, 11, 12 plus tax. So you might be closer to $15 by the time you get out the door for that sandwich that was $10. Like, you got to be able to afford a $15 sandwich if you're going to sit down at that restaurant. But now it's like, you go to like the dry cleaner, and the check, it's a lot of it has to do with the credit card, and that suggested like 20, 25, and 30% tip on things where I'm like, this is a service industry, but I wasn't prepared. Like, it's out of control, I think, just in the sense that like it feels like it's being pushed everywhere. And similar to like just us shutting down all of the like brand messages and communications, that because there's so many, I think what I'm reading as I've been kind of like looking into this is like, just a lot of Americans especially are just kind of shutting down this being generous with all of them because it's so fatigued.
Yeah.
And
It's everywhere.
and then you're adding a 30% option on, which just feels like it's too high to me. Maybe I'm
and here's an observation.
old school, but
No, that's observation, because the fatigue is real, and maybe it's not felt day to day, but over time, I think it plays out, and you see the movement from big box stores to online. Because I just walked by a Bed Bath and Beyond that was completely empty and shut down yesterday, actually. And when you go shop there, and let's round it up for blank, right? Or let's boom. Or would you like to give $2 today? Or would you boom? And you're forced to look a person in the face and tip for, what am I tipping for? Again, on the day of, you may give $1 for guilt, or you may move it, but over time, I'm going to move to online, or I'm going to avoid having to face that. Because if I felt something that day, I'm going to remember that before going back to that store the next time. Fair?
Yeah, it's totally fair.
So it's like over time, I think there's been, that fallout with so it's something to keep talking about, and still, how do you still promote generosity and living with open arms, not just kind of this like mine, take.
Right. And generosity for generosity's sake, not generosity for the clicks, for the views, for the clout, for whatever, but just living a lifestyle of generosity because it's better for the world.
So what does that have to do with value, and what does that have to do with the question you guys asked about this being a pillar? Like, how do we inspire more generosity? And why am I bringing up tips? Well, how do you inspire more tips? How do you inspire more generosity? You bring more value.
That's it.
Right? So it's like, I just don't know that like somebody grabbing my cup of coffee, inspires me to give like a $2 tip on top of a $4 coffee that I know I shouldn't be buying in the first place, right?
Totally.
So, but I'll tell you what, if they have made a point to reach out to me, if they've made a point to have a conversation with me while they're making, if they've made a point to connect with me on an emotional level, there's some value there in a communal aspect that I would place higher. In fact, my favorite coffee shops in Tampa have nothing to do with the flavor of the coffee. It's 100% the vibe, and the vibe setter, the DJ of the vibe in that shop is the barista.
Totally.
Every single time. There's a really cool place right down on Limeball, not too far from our office, called The Grind. And there's a barista who's been there for like 10 years.
Shout out to The Grind.
Shout out to The Grind.
Yeah.
And I probably haven't been back in a while, but I send so many people there. I'm always like, you should go there. It's a really good environment. And I've always get great service from those baristas. So whatever they're doing over there, it's working. But I'll drive past 3 or 4 other coffee shops just to go there, or send somebody there, or meet up with somebody there.
That's great.
Because of that. So value, I think, like with Verse, we're constantly looking at saying, hey, where can we find value? Can we talk like for another 5 minutes about this?
Let's do it.
Creating generosity. So how does a nonprofit and a for-profit get inspired generosity and philanthropy? There was a really good study, and we use this a lot of times in our strategy work, and it's called the Pyramid of Brand Values. And basically this Bain & Company study looked at 30 different elements of brand value, which were breaking down why people were loyal and making purchases from a certain brand. What were the reasons that they said, well, I like this brand and I'm going to be loyal to this brand? It would be things like, at the base level, is like they're just practical things like quality, right? Or it connects this thing. It makes sense. And you have to have the base before you go to the top. Like, I'm not going to buy the next tier without the foundational thing.
Correct.
So you got to have something quality, and I think there's like 7 or 8, maybe 9 of those like baseline ones. But as you climb up, I'm not going to do we could do a whole podcast on just
The values.
the pyramid there. Maybe we should, but at the very top is life changing. And at the very, very top of that is self-transcending, and it's world-changing. And so when you looked at all those things, the life-changing is like provides hope and motivates, and it's like heirloom. These are really like super, super important brand values that super like will just cement a customer in. But at the top of all of that stuff, though, it's making the world a better place. Self-transcendence.
Yeah.
And it's saying like, hey, that is the highest brand value. So for an organization who is not being very generous and is not inspiring generosity by modeling it and by giving back to their community and looking for opportunities to give back to their community and to find something more meaningful on top of the thing that they do, or for nonprofits who think, well, we've built our whole business oftentimes around self-transcendence. How do we give our current family, if you will, like our members or our people who are already bought in to what it is that we do, how do we give them the voice to go out and inspire their community to be self-transcending as well, and to communicate that? And so when I say the word value is where you start, to know that there is nothing greater to cement your brand in a community than to actually go change the world, to actually make the world a better place by the thing that you feel called to do.
Yeah.
You've got to talk about it. You've got to get it out there. You've got to get that message, and you've got to give your people, if you are doing it, you've got to give them the way to talk about it. And that will inspire generosity. And I think if you're most of the people that we talk to, I'm making a lot of generalizations today. I'm probably upsetting a lot of people.
That was earlier on the PTSD statements. You're good. They already left.
But so many people do so much good and don't talk about it because they do good for the right reasons not to talk about it. But they're missing out on the opportunity to inspire generosity by actually sharing the good. I mean, if we do turn on TV, or if we look at our social feeds, there's so much negativity because negativity is a way more captivating story. That it just doesn't get the publicity and it doesn't really get the shares. But we've got to figure out how to produce more positivity. We got to talk more about the good things that we're doing, and that will change our communities.
That's
that
good.
will inspire more generosity.
Justin, would you say it's pretty common to find nonprofits or organizations that would say, yeah, we're adding value, but maybe it's a little bit lower on that pyramid, and so they're kind of like, yeah, we're good, but they're not reaching those highest levels of like self-transcendent or helping people to do that. Is that pretty common? That it's just, that we're kind of like, we're pretty happy to stay down here at the bottom, but not really thinking through how do we get to the top?
I don't think so. No, I actually think most nonprofits do a phenomenal job on the top half of the pyramid. It's for-profits do a really great job on the bottom half of the pyramid,
Yeah.
and they
The
actually
functional
need help
side.
getting.
Yeah,
They're on the functional
Yeah.
side, but the nonprofits they're doing it. Like they're called to it. They're suffering. Some of them are dealing with a lot to be doing the thing that they're doing. They are motivating. The problem I see more often than not is they don't know how to communicate it.
Right.
They struggle to get that message out. They struggle to maximize what they're doing. And they will oftentimes get together with other nonprofits like them and they'll say, like, we're doing great in our bubble. Like, well, they'll look in their bubble and they say, you're doing pretty good for where we're at, for what we are, for who we are.
For this bubble.
We write all these excuses for ourselves. And the reality is, I don't believe that limitation is being set on them by God, because they have access to everything.
That's good.
And I just feel like there's probably a very healthy conviction for me to say, hey, like, if you were called to do this thing, you were not called to do it within these limitations. You have access to all of these tools, and for you to turn a blind eye would be similar to early churches disregarding the printing press and saying, no, it is only righteous and holy for people to come and hear the word of God spoken by pastors or by priests in this language at this synagogue or at this temple or at this church, right? And we do not need to distribute God's word through the printing press, because then it could be potentially be put in the wrong hands, and it could be potentially, misspoken of.
Yeah.
And so I don't think they're bad people. I'm not saying that like they were doing it with wrong intent even. But I think it's kind of that way with technology today. Like that was the technology of that time. And we look at it now and we'd be like, yeah, you'd be crazy not to distribute the Bible. You'd be crazy not to print, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But yet we're doing the same thing, and we're like closing our doors to reaching people who are completely the people we want to reach.
Right.
And we're saying, no, they need to come into our door. They need to knock on our door. They need to bang down our door if they want to be a part of whatever our nonprofit is. And we're not really doing a great job of actually like using the technology that we have to communicate, to reach, and to cultivate any kind of presence or brand awareness even with the kind of people that we need to be reaching.
That's gold right there. We may have to change our entire manifesto for this podcast and start over. Just build it on the values and the pyramid and call it a day. So this might be the first and last time you heard about our manifesto. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Point 37 of our manifesto.
Our manifesto is so great. Just a great reminder. We will unpack, the entire pyramid, the element of values in a whole nother episode because there's so much there.
Yeah.
It's so important. But thanks, Justin. I appreciate the insights. We will have you back. I think that's part of our his contract, right?
Yes. Well, it's part of our contract.
Yeah. We will have you back. Be honored to have you back. That's what you scheduled right now.
The tip jar was actually for Justin.
Yeah, I love it. Yes. So don't forget to tip your waiters. But yeah, what a concept. What a concept. Every time I'm tipping, I'm going to be thinking now, and talk about a whole episode on memorable experiences. What's the last time I've tipped 100%? When it's been that that value added or that memorable moment or above and beyond or you name it, right? And there's those experiences. But we'll keep chatting and talking. Any final thoughts, Justin, before we get out of here? Anywhere you're performing? Anything you like to plug? Anything you like to sell?
Yeah, you breaking out that Les Paul anytime soon?
Yeah. Where can they find your eBay channel? Buy your.
Was that you I saw busking down in Tampa the other? No, that was different.
There was a different guy. Yeah, it was a different guy. I would say the biggest thing is reach out to versecreative.com and schedule a strategy session. These are the kind of conversations that we have. We can apply the general things I've said to your exact situation.
Totally.
Yeah.
And help you get over some of the problems that you're working through. There's nothing really more fun than these kind of conversations. This is like what gets me out of bed in the morning, is solving problems like this, talking about it. So yeah, I would say jump on, reach out, shoot us a message, in the contact form, drop us a line, and we'll get back to you and get you scheduled with the team.
I love it.
Get some strategy going.
Justin, thanks so much, man.
Thanks for having me. You guys are awesome.
It's been great.
This was fun.
You guys are really fun. I can't wait to see the rest of the guests, hear the rest of the podcasts that you guys are going to make.
Hey, don't forget, we're trying to go further, trying to grow faster, ignite a renaissance. So thanks again for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.
See you guys.
Thanks again for listening to the Nonprofit Renaissance. We hope it ignites a renaissance in you and helps you go further and grow faster. Be sure to share, rate, and subscribe. And if you'd like to recommend or be a guest on our show, send us an email at podcast@versecreative.com.